In July, it was pretty hot, so I spent a lot of time staying inside and playing video games to avoid both the heat and also the awful humidity. And today, I'm going to be talking about some of the games I played, starting with Noobs Are Coming. This is a bullet heaven game, or survivor-like game, or whatever we're calling that genre at this point. And I go through phases where I play a lot of these, followed by not having that much interest in the genre. And currently I'm not really in the interested phase. But the premise was cool enough that I decided to jump in and at least play a few rounds, because this game is heavily inspired by Brotato, meaning it's way less grindy than a lot of the other bullet heaven games. I also like that it borrowed the idea from Brotato that your relics have a cost. Yes, you get an upside, but there's also always a downside. This leads to a very nice push-pull, where not everything's an upgrade, and sometimes it's just better to sit on your money, as opposed to buying a thing for the sake of it. But to be clear, this game isn't just a carbon copy of Brotato either. The weapons feel quite different, and there are some new mechanics, like a mount, which scales projectiles from certain attacks. Yeah, it'd be kind of OP if every attack scaled, so only some of them do. There are also minion builds. Yep, that's right, you can be a necromancer. Well, kinda sort of. There are kickable items. In other words, you walk up to it and you literally kick it into enemies. Kinda hard to aim, not super practical, but oh boy do they hit hard. And there are even mini-me's, things that duplicate your attacks, which of course with a good build is pretty darn OP. So if you enjoy bullet heaven games, and especially if you enjoy Brotato, I recommend checking out Noobs Are Coming. Personally, I haven't played a ton so far, but I definitely plan to revisit it in the future when I'm in the mood for another bullet heaven. But the game I spent most of my time playing was Hellclock. The easiest way to describe this is, imagine if Path of Exile was a roguelike. And yes, I know Path of Exile technically has a Forbidden Sanctum, but no. This is a roguelike that was inspired by ARPGs like Path of Exile. And you know what? I've really been enjoying the rogue ARPG subgenre, because I like a lot of elements, especially around buildcraft in ARPGs. But I don't necessarily like all the grinding to get there. I was very much one of those people that use the power of trade in Path of Exile to skip all the grinding and get to the fun part by playing the economy instead of killing monsters. And so the rogue ARPGs are way less grindy. More of that time is spent in the fun part, blasting enemies and tinkering with builds. In the case of Hellclock, a lot of the build tinkering comes in the form of unique relics that modify how your skills behave. In some cases, strictly making it better. In some cases, offering you new ways to build around it, not necessarily better or worse, just different. And so when I first started playing, I barely killed the final boss of a campaign. It was a real challenge, came close to the wire. That boss has kind of a soft enrage, but I did it. More recently, when they added the new Abyss and Oblivion endgame modes, I killed the final boss of Oblivion, which has like tens of billions of health, in just a couple seconds. Gonna have a video on that soon. I took my original build, min-maxed a bunch of stuff, applied all the things I learned. It was awesome. And that's the thing. Hellclock for me is the fun parts of an ARPG without the boring parts. And after you complete the campaign, there's different modes to cater to different playstyles. There's Abyss and Oblivion. This is a continuation of a campaign. You get all of your gear that you already had, all of your relics. In addition, you can now find higher tier gear and higher tier relics, which have absolutely crazy stats. That's part of how I got the insane tens of billions of DPS. But then there's also Ascension. And personally, I think Ascension is a lot harder, because in Ascension, it is a true roguelike. All of your progress, well, almost all of it, there's a little bit in terms of constellation points, but almost all of your progress resets every time you start a new run. And I really like this approach, because I've seen a lot of people who are just starting to get into Hellclock, and they're like, I don't want to lose all those relics I just spent time getting. And they can play Abyss and Oblivion. But when it comes to Abyss and Oblivion, there's an endpoint. You can only spend so long blasting the enemies with your OP build. That's where Ascension comes in. It offers new challenges, because now you have to think about things differently. You can't just use the same strategy over and over again. You need to work with what you've got. And so, personally, I think this is a really smart design decision. Not only does it allow players to cater to the endgame they personally enjoy, but it adds replayability to the game without adding just, hey, you can grind infinitely. Because there isn't anything infinite, it's about trying different things. By the way, if you want to see videos for Hellclock, get subscribed to my main channel, because I'm definitely going to be making more of them. Now, the last game that I played in July, which I want to talk about, is Wuchang Fallen Feathers. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about this last one. Because on the one hand, the combat was fun. But on the other hand, the game definitely had some problems, And honestly, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everyone. On the positive side, the pace of combat is much faster than most Souls-likes, because instead of just having to worry about a limited mana bar, you have Skyborn Might, a resource that refills based on a lot of weapon mechanics and also when you perfect dodge. If Sekiro is the just parry game, then Wuchang Fallen Feathers is the just dodge game. And I think this felt really good because it encouraged me to be aggressive, to get close to enemies and dodge their attacks, which generated Skyborn Might, and then let me use OP abilities. In terms of the boss fights, they're flashy, but this is where I have my first problem with the game. They're also very fast and aggressive, and they seem to be even more aggressive when you're trying to heal, which feels really bad. Number one, because if you get knocked down, you're probably dead. It takes a million years to get up. Yes, this is going to be patched. And number two, very often the boss would attack me while I started drinking, miss, then attack again and hit me before I finished my drink, which is also something the devs are working on fixing, but it's really frustrating that the game went live in this state. I also found that personally, I didn't have that much fun when I was trying to fight fair, but I did have a lot of fun when I was playing OP builds and breaking the game, such as playing a spellcaster with infinite dodges. I went from fighting a boss that had just been smashing me attempt after attempt to almost doing a no-hit run and completely obliterating it. On another boss, I realized he wields a weapon and he uses his weapon for almost all of his attacks. There's a mechanic called Clash where you passively deflect weapons. Think parry, except you don't have to do anything except attack. And yeah, that also trivialized that boss. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with that, but at the same time, it's the sort of fun where I do it once and then I'm done. I think this is why some people are going to love the game and others are going to hate it. But after playing both Elden Ring and Lies of P, Wuchang Fallen Feathers really does feel like a step back in the genre. It feels too much like earlier Souls games, in ways that make me think I've already played this, rather than being oh, that's cool, they're really doing justice to the original. Also, one of the things that I was really hoping for going into Wuchang was the story, because in the early trailers it promised a narrative full of morally ambiguous choices, something that I loved from Witcher 3. The game actually provides a story that is full of barely comprehensible choices. I rarely knew what the result was going to be whenever I selected a specific dialogue. So I kind of just went, alright, enemies are over there, I'm going to kill them and rush from boss to boss. Made some OP builds, taught some people how to use OP builds on bosses, and called it good with the game. With all that said, Wuchang Fallen Feathers is the first game from the developer Lindsay. They do have some good ideas there, so I am really curious what they learn from this and what they do next. And so, those are the games that I played in July of 2025. Now I'm curious, what games were you playing last month? Let me know down in the comments below. But for now, I'm going to get going, so thank you very much for watching to the end. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.